In this lesson, let's learn how to test instance methods. The first thing we are going to do is perform a little bit of refactor. If you notice in our test, we are creating a new user, saving that user to the database before each and every test. So we can move this into the before all hook. So I'll cut out this functionality and place it in the before all hook. Then I'll also cut out the user and place it outside of the before all hook because we want to use this. So if we also want access to the created user, I'll declare a constant, I'll declare a variable outside and then reassign it in the before all hook. That way, in our test, we can have access to these two variables. Next, I'm going to delete this completely from our test, and our test only perform the assertion. To make sure this works, we can run yarn test. Okay, looks like that was successful. Next, let's go to our user model, and if you see, we have a generate token instance method which generates a valid JWT for a user using the JWT secret. Now to test this functionality, I'm going to create a new describe block, and this is going to be called the generate token method. And in here, I would have an it method that says should generate a valid JWT for a user. And how is this test going to look? First, we need a user, right? And we already have that user. Next, we need to call the method to generate a token. So constant token is going to be equal to created user dot generate token. Now this method is expected to return to us a valid JWT. And how do we verify that this JWT is valid? We need to import the JSON Web Token library itself. Then we are also going to import config from @config. This is the config that contains the JSON Web Token secret. So if you check out the config which is in the server folder, you would see that it has this JWT secret. And that's also what is used in the user model to sign the token. Now, in our test, we are going to get the data or the payload from the token by saying jwt.verify, and the verify method takes in the token and the secret or public key. So we'll pass in the token and then we'll pass in config.jwt secret. Then we expect that this payload should contain the user's ID because that's what our generate token method does. So from the payload, we will get the ID so we can destructure it out. And then we are going to expect the ID to equal the created user dot underscore ID. Okay, so let's run this test. And we're going to receive some unexpected behavior. The test fails and it tells us it expected this and it gave us this. And this looks like exactly the same string to me. But let's find out what's going on. We are going to log type of the created user.id. And let's run this test again. We can turn off the assertion so it doesn't fail. And now we can see that the type of the created user.id is an object, but the token is already a string. So this is what we are going to do. We are going to make sure that we convert this to a string before we actually assert with it. There's a number of ways you can do this, but I think the easiest or the fastest is to stringify it and pass it again. So json.stringify the created user ID and then pass it again, and that's going to become a string. And now if we run our test, we have a successful test. We are successfully verifying that the generate token method returns a valid JWT. Now notice how the indentation for this test are done. We have the user model, which is the describe block at the top, and then we also have the generate token method, which is the describe in the middle of the test. And this is really good for readability. Your tests are supposed to be descriptive of how your application behaves, and just reading through this test alone, I can have a really good idea of how the user model behaves without ever looking at it.